Hey everyone, it's Gramps here with the Mechabellum replay. Today's game is all about defending against the gospel. Our opponent is King Carp and we're playing in the 1800 to 1900 MMR range. Now immediately, none of these starting packs were really calling out to me. However, I was leaning towards Cost Control Specialist because I wanted more practice with Cost Control Sludges. So after thinking about it for a little bit, we do end up deciding to go for Cost Control Specialist, with the plan of playing more of a tempo or aggressive game with Sedges on the line. However, immediately we notice that our opponent has taken Typhoon Spec with the Crawler Steel Ball Opener. Because this is a bad matchup for us, we instead take a defensive formation and put our Sedges in columns in front of the towers. In addition, we expect our opponent to add Hounds to their starting composition, so we're going to go ahead and pick up Void Eyes and immediately tech Energy Absorption. This will make the Void Eyes fairly tanky and act as chaff-ish units, and make it incredibly difficult for my opponent to knock them out unless they can get a lock-on with the Steel Ball or target it during a tower debuff. Now, all this being said, we still expect to lose these opening rounds, at least the first one, unless my opponent goes for like a weird standard deployment with units around both towers. But hopefully with the Void Eyes, the columns of Sedges, and the center defensive deployment, we'll be able to avoid most of the HP damage and prevent our opponent from building too much tempo with a favorable matchup. And we do see my opponent is playing async aggro, and they've chosen Hounds as well. Nothing too surprising this round, my opponent should get a quick tower paralyze and be able to mop up this side of the army fairly quickly. Taking just a little bit under 300 damage, we're not too upset about that. Fairly happy about that. Round 2, we do immediately start with our first unit drop. Now, seeing the Phantom Rays being offered, I fully expect my opponent to go for them. They have Typhoon spec, and the Phantom Ray Typhoon flank is extremely popular and can be quite strong once it gets going. Now, I know Farseer is the correct move here. Not only is it good against what my opponent has on their field, but it also counters the pick that I expect my opponent to take. So we go ahead and take the Farseers, and we're going to place the Farseer on the outside of this tower. Now, we place it here to take care of any potential flank here, and we're going to go ahead and deploy a Sledge. The reason I put a Sledge in front of these Crawlers is because I want them to not die immediately to the Hounds and try and distract these Steel Balls. Because the Farseer is just too good right now, we go ahead and add a second Farseer to our starting composition. Now, something that really took me off guard, I guess took me completely by surprise, was the fact that they sold the Phantom Rays and immediately placed the Wasp on the flank. You know, seeing that move, I had my suspicions that I was facing a, not necessarily a cookie cutter comp, but that my opponent had a plan in mind and nothing was going to stop them from pursuing it. Now, fortunately, even with that Farseer misplacement, I moved it to the inside of the tower at the last second, worried a little bit too much about this tower being vulnerable. That ended up being okay, just because I had a second Farseer here that was able to clean up everything. Okay, in round 3, immediately the only thing that catches my eye is this improved firepower control system. I don't really have anything that I can level up, and while if I knew what my opponent was going for, the giant manufacturing could have been good, what helps me immediately is the module here. So we go ahead and put it on this Farseer, and since we need to take care of this flank, we place a Sledgehammer and another Farseer. We go out and take an attack enhancement, and that's because we're cost control and I don't want to fall too far behind in stats. Now I know it doesn't necessarily change any breakpoints between the sludges and the crawlers, for example, but it should help taking care of other units. Now immediately both of my front sludges get missiled, and I see my opponent has gone for another wasp and another rhino. Seeing this flank, I have my suspicions that we're facing the gospel. I don't know for sure, but you know, having faced this comp a couple times before on the ladder, I'm fairly confident that's what my opponent's going for. You know, combined with selling a unit drop round 2 for wasps, as well as deploying another wasp and a rhino on my flank, I don't really see what else this could be. And once again, the Farseer here just showing how incredibly strong it is in this situation. Just gonna clean up everything here, once again. Second round out, it has 79 kills. Incredible unit. Okay, in round 4, we're given a couple interesting options here. Realistically, only the additional deployment slot and the smoke bomb should be taken. The other options are way too expensive for round 4. Now, knowing my opponent gets a free Typhoon this turn, and expecting them to maximize their deployments since wasps and rhinos are fairly cheap, we go ahead and take the additional deployment slot. Now this is also just really good for us because we're cost control and we just get additional supplies every round. So we have our suspicions, but I'm not 100% sure. So right now I just want to focus on getting my chaff clear down pat. My opponent doesn't have too many crawlers, but the sludges are decent DPS as well, and reasonable health pool, or they have reasonable health pools, so they're fairly tanky. So I'm not too upset about deploying more. We go ahead and give a promotion to this Farseer. At this point, it kind of deserves it. I mean, it's been out for 2 rounds, it has almost 80 kills, and probably by far the most damage on our board. Okay, and I do missile the flank here. That missile was actually intended for the wasp. It was just a bit of a happy accident that it hit a crawler anyways. Ooh, and that Void Eye sniping that rhino right before the tower connection. I did put in a tower level expecting my opponent to continue going for this tower, but that's largely just to reduce the paralyzed time. And once again, this Farseer is just going to clean up everything. And then just look at the damage on this guy. Not even worried. The Farseer does a really good job of supporting your units by wiping out the enemy army. That's what I've noticed. Okay, round 5. Another spell round. I thought about taking Rhino Assault or Wasp form. We could get in some kind of backdoor tower paralyze, but I'm also tempted by the Ion Blast. It's not too useful now, but I know my opponent is going to fill out this flank, and there's quite a bit already in this front. So I think the Ion Blast would be quite valuable. Now I do make the mistake of aiming it on this flank. If we just look at the supply cost here, we're probably at most hitting maybe 300 supply worths of units, but if we had aimed it in this front here, we would have immediately hit about 500 to 600 units worth of supplies and then potentially gotten even more. So I was way too occupied with trying to defend this flank that I chose a fairly poor position for this Ion Beam. I don't really expect this to hit anything more than like maybe a Wasp pack and half a pack of Crawlers or something. And since we are using Sludges for Chaff Clear, we go ahead and deploy more of them and we click Mech Rage. The reason I click Mech Rage is because we're in a defensive position and almost all my units are getting in combat almost immediately. And really, I just want the crawlers to be taken out as soon as possible, so I can make connections with the dangerous units. Now with that Rhino drop coming out and sniping that back Farseer, and with that terribly aimed Ion Beam, we're going to take quite a bit of damage here. But at this point, my suspicions are more than confirmed. I know I'm facing the Gospel, the Swarm, and I have an idea of how I want to defend against it. And that first part of that plan is using Sudge's Chaff. We already have the tech that we need. All we need is Mech Rage. And if we need more Chaff Clear, we just have to make more Sudges. Now here we're offered a couple more interesting options. The Vulcan Descent, in my opinion, is too expensive unless you have tech Vulcans to really make use of it. The Incendiary Bomb is interesting because even though there isn't too much on the ground, we could still make good use of it in the front here and burn out a lot of this opening chaff. So deciding between taking the Incendiary Bomb or skipping, we do end up taking the Incendiary Bomb and we place it in the front here. Now we have a decent amount of supplies, and I want to get the other part of my counter on the board. So we go ahead and recruit 2 fortresses and immediately click Anti-Air Barrage. Now forts with AA will be my primary answer to this comp. It should be able to handle the Rhinos and the Wasps. And I'll be completely honest, I was not looking at the tech bar for these Rhinos. The Boom Rhinos take me completely by surprise here. I mean, you'll see that, yeah, it gets a tower connection here, and with the timing of this tower paralyze, with the second tower paralyze on top of that, we're gonna be taking quite a bit of damage here. I still do think that Fort AA is the correct counter to both the Rhinos and the Wasps. I definitely should have been looking at the tech bar though. Now it's round 7 and we get our second unit drop. I take a little bit of time here to look at the tech bar to see what my opponent has available on their Rhinos and the Wasps. And so we do briefly consider if maybe we should take one of these unit drops to help our board, but ultimately the Vulcan is probably the right play here, selling it and just making sure to fill out the answer that we know we already have. So yeah, we do end up going for the Vulcan here. We immediately sell it. We get a level up on this fort because it doesn't increase the damage or the number of the AA barrages, but we're still using the fortresses to try and knock out Rhinos. And for that purpose, we get Launcher Overload as well. Now I always try and maximize my deployment, so we do deploy 3 more forts. We get a couple levels on these sledges. It's not going to help them really kill anything important, but it should just add some health to our field. Now since we're not really sure which angle my opponent is going to be attacking from, we kind of just add, you know, sudges and forts covering every possible avenue of attack. So really at this point it's a question of, can we outscale our opponent? You know, can our opponent knock us out before we get enough forts with enough levels on the field to really wipe out all of this? And you can see already, the fort AAs, they're not the most reliable thing, but when you get as many of them, you know, as I have, even with 5 forts, they do a decent job. And here we can kind of see the Boom Rhino being a little bit of a double-edged sword there. It does allow pretty early tower connections, especially against heavy ground DPS, but at the same time, it can lead to some nasty chain reactions where you wipe out a ton of HP. While I did expect to win this round, I'm not too unhappy with the amount of damage. I mean, it wasn't too much. And here at the start of round 8, we're given probably the best module we could have asked for, the Mustang production line. We're going to take that and immediately put it on this fort and level it up. The reason we choose this fort is because I've been noticing that this side of my field tends to survive longer, and because this doesn't have a spawn limit, it should produce a ton of Mustangs to just be annoying chaff. And again, we're going to maximize our deployments and place more forts and more sledges. I want the sledges not only clearing chaff, but kind of acting as a first line of defense for these rhinos to blow up on. And I briefly mentioned at round 7, looking at the tech bar, I saw that they had Photon, which is why I didn't go for any EMP play. Fort's doing an incredible job taking out the rhinos and the wasps. Even through a level 3 tower, these debuffs are pretty brutal. However, it does seem like we're finally starting to get things turned around, and we do win this round, dealing a decent amount of damage to our opponent. Now round 9, we're given our 3rd unit drop. I was really hoping for something I could sell here, so I can make my board stronger. But we're not given a single unit drop here, so I'm deciding between the Raiden and the Stormcaller. Now the Raiden would be a better drop just to sell in general, but I do recognize that the right tower is really undefended. So I'm thinking of taking the Storm, selling one, and going for some kind of tower cheese. And that is what we end up doing. We sell one of the Storms immediately, and we place another one on this flank here. Now our Ion Blast is back, and I remember how poorly it went on this flank, so I do decide to place it on the front here. I did realize that my opponent's Rhino Assault was back up, and I thought they'd try and use it as some kind of mini nuke, but there wasn't a whole lot I could do about it, so I just decided to fill out a second line of forts on this side, another line of sledges in front, to hopefully try and prevent this tower from going down again. I do briefly consider giving these Farseers a level, but at this point, they are truly support units, just cleaning up a little bit of the units that are left. They're no longer my primary damage dealer, and they really haven't been since probably round 5. This Ion Beam is much better for us, and it does look like that Tower Paralyze is gonna come in. And it's looking really good here, but right before it lands, we have a Boom Rhino blow up. And that is quite unfortunate. We're gonna get a lot of the left side of our army cleaned up during that tower debuff. But we do land our own tower debuff, and using kind of that counter paralyzed time, we're able to clean up the rest of this army. And honestly, I think if I hadn't gone for this tower paralyzed, we might have lost this round. Dealing quite a bit of damage, we keep ourselves in the game. So round 10. Round 10, I would almost always normally skip this, but we haven't bought the second attack enhancement, and for 300, I think it was, what was it, 350 supplies, we can boost the damage of our board, and the attack is pretty relevant here because the forts are not one-shotting the rhinos anyways. The attack buff from the card here should increase the damage of these anti-air barrages, just to make sure these wasps are getting killed. And I have quite a few sludges with Mech Rage. It should just help them deal maybe a little bit more damage. You know, it's just all the small things that count. And immediately at the start of the round, I do sell out the storms, expecting them to be answered. You know, even a missile here, and then like a crawler here would answer the storm pretty sufficiently. I want to use the cash to make my board stronger, since I'm not expecting the paralyze to go through again, so we sell it. You know, we add a level. I'm really tired of getting paralyzed at all from this tower, so we go ahead and make it level 5. And we just fill out our board. Now, the reason I'm continuing to level this fortress past level 2 is because I am eventually planning on taking Barrier as maybe as a gut shot, or in a situation where I feel like I just need a little bit more HP on the board to win. And by a little, I mean quite a bit. I think it's effectively a 35 to 40% HP pool increase because I'm running cost control spec. Yeah, I noticed immediately at the start of this round, I was like, damn, if I had kept the storms here, we would have gotten like an immediate paralyze. The crawlers placed on the line were inside of the storm's minimum range, so they would have locked onto the tower here. A bit of a bummer here, and we do once again take quite a bit of damage. Really, I think the Mustang production is saving our ass here. And now we're both in probably 1 round territory. So at the start of round 11, we're offered another production item. I did briefly consider the Acid Blast, but I mean, all my opponents' rhinos have photon coating, and there isn't really too much to hit with the Acid Blast. It's not like we're struggling with the Typhoon or the balls. Our main issue are flyers, you know, they're wasps. So we take the steel ball production, we place it on the giant, and immediately we're going to click Barrier. Now this is going to provide 40,000 HP per fortress level in this bubble here. And since we have 9 fortresses, one of them being level 4, one of them being level 1, the rest of them being level 2, and because we're cost control specialist, if we look at this fort here, it has about 90,000 HP. This is an effective 40% increase to our health pool. And with the added benefit of completely dropping this acid spell, which I was fully expecting. Now, another thing I make sure to do is try and missile these front rhinos. I didn't quite have enough money to fortify this, so I took a bit of a gamble, hoping my opponent doesn't shield, and this missile will slow them enough to where they don't get in range. To help with that, we add a shield in front of these sledges just to make sure they can't get missiled out. And immediately you see the value of the barriers here. Not only did they stop missiles that my opponent placed, but I mean, we're seeing units live that haven't lived in a long time. We still have Void Eyes, we still have sledges, and it's looking really good. I mean, even this Farseer survived. Look at the damage on this bad boy. And yeah, it's looking pretty good. I mean, we did get a couple drops that were favorable for us, but, you know, so did our opponent. I think it was a really good game overall, and a successful defense against the Gospel. Now, I won't say this is the canonical defense, because Wraiths are usually pretty good, but in the position I was in where I could have dropped Wraiths, the Wasps were already level 2, and I didn't feel like elite recruiting them. And I'm fairly confident in Fort AA being able to answer both the Rhinos and the Wasps. Now, this was a bit of a unique game because I'm not used to seeing Boom Rhino, Final Blitz. And yeah, like I said, that completely took me by surprise. And I think you'll see, you know, it did allow my opponent to land some pretty sick tower connections. But also, it did help me survive for longer because there are a couple instances where there were, you know, pretty big chain reactions with the boom rhinos taking out their own units. Now, before ending this video, I did just want to cover a couple things really quickly, and I did mention it at the start of round 10, but I want to highlight how big of a difference a single unit can make here. So in a real game, I would never really do this because at this point, you know, the flank's been shown, your hand's been shown, and your opponent should properly answer this. But in the case in which I had left it, I just want to show, you know, how differently this round would have gone. So we'll make the same choices. I believe I recruited a sledge here, and then a sledge here. Maybe like a crawler here. Okay, this is not the exact turn I took, but it's fairly similar. I think the main thing I want to showcase is what happens when the storm stays. So yeah, because they're in the minimum range, we're gonna get that immediate tower paralyze. And, you know, might be speaking too soon, but this should be a pretty convincing win for us. So yeah, I mean, in a real game, or in the game that this took place, obviously, as well, you know, the storms would be sold immediately. And if we look at the minimum range here, this is not the way to answer the storms, especially with one tower level. A level 4 Stormcaller, as you saw, took it out in like half a volley or something. So flank defense is very important here, but, you know, realistically, after flanking with the Stormcaller, you would sell it. So I guess this is more of a thought experiment rather than what would happen in a game. And the last thing I want to cover really quickly is highlight how close this game was throughout the entirety of it. I think even in this last round, my opponent had a way to win this, so we'll just take over for them. So if I were playing in my opponent's position, so in the first place I would skip here, because we see that barrier is available on the fortress. You know, the forts have been leveling and there's 9 of them, right? At this point, if barrier hasn't been clicked, you know, it's a fairly obvious choice. It just adds way too much value. The second thing is, these rhinos are getting missiled. That's preventing them from really getting anywhere and pretty much wasting these deployments. We're going to try and protect at least one of the rhinos with a shield. And seeing what we're up against, I think swarm missiles on Abyss is probably the best answer. The auto attack on these guys is absolutely gonna wreck any barriers that show up, and hopefully we can get some kind of tower snipe with the missiles. Now unfortunately, we didn't shield correctly here. The Rhino does still get hit with the missile. The reason I decided to place both of my Abysses on this side is because, I mean, this is a level 5 tower. Even taking it down is going to be like a 1 second paralyzed. There's just not a whole lot of value in pushing hard for that side. So instead we try and push for this side and try and get a tower paralyze. Be quite a difficult situation, but I believe that does allow us to survive. Minus about 600, so yeah, that would let us survive, and I just want to do the round again to show how much, like, one or two RNG factors, you know, how big of a difference one or two RNG factors can make. So we're going to make the same moves. Hopefully shield this a little better. I guess getting the Rhino not missiled is not an RNG factor. That's largely to do with the Abyss missiles here. But full disclosure, I have run this a couple of times from my opponent's perspective. I've tried various Titans as well, and the Abyss performs the best by far. Now, what I find pretty important to actually winning this for my opponent is making sure this Rhino doesn't get missiled, and including this Abyss in a mobile beacon towards the tower. Okay, we did successfully shield the Rhino that time. This one's not looking too good. Full disclosure, running this a few times, most of the time this wins, maybe like 6 out of 10 times, but there is still a decent amount of RNG. We'll do it one more time just to try and showcase a winning board. Okay, successfully stopped the missile again. Okay, just barely. This this one should be a winning one, but yeah, as you can see, it is still quite very close. It is quite a difficult position, but we do win this round. And with this much damage, it should be lethal. Yeah, just barely. But yeah, as you can see, I mean, we had to run that 3 different times. We did basically the exact same thing. I think we messed up the bubble the first time, so we ran this twice doing the same exact thing. And really, it was just a little bit of RNG that made the difference there. And even the first time, we did end up surviving. We lost the round, but we took, I think it was like 600 damage. So yeah, this was a very close game, very fun game. And I think a pretty good example of what to do against the Swarm. The important part about, I guess, answering the Swarm or the Gospel is identifying what you're up against as soon as possible. You know, if you can identify it early and have a game plan. In my situation, it was using Sledges with Mech Rage for Chaff Clear, and then just spamming out as much forts as I could to try and answer the Rhino and Wasps. Getting the Farseer unit drop definitely helped early as well. I think from rounds 2, 3, and 4, I mean, a single Farseer basically helped me win those rounds. But yeah, I mean, that's all for today. I appreciate you guys hanging out for the video. If you enjoyed the content, consider liking, subscribing. If you have any thoughts or comments, let me know down below. And if you want to see me play live, follow me on Twitch. But that's all for now, and I appreciate you guys for hanging out. I'll catch you guys next time.